Do you rent or do you sell?
Let's figure that out. Talk to me.
Good morning.
Good morning.
That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about when you own a home and maybe you're relocating. Do you actually sell your house and make a clean break, get on to the next one, or do you keep it and rent it? And we're going to cover that today, along with Quinvestors, of course. And you're going to tell me about what's up with this hat.
Don't we have a painting in our bathroom that says nice hat?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. One of my most favorite pieces of art.
Yeah. So we'll be in Key West here in a few days to talk a little bit about life and relaxation. And maybe we can find that painting down there that we swung and missed on the first time.
Which is where the painting came from.
Right. So the hat, we just got back from Austin, Texas for our The One Thing visit. And we do that every year.
Okay.
So for a few years now, I've been looking for a Stetson. And it just so happens that we were recently in Vegas for a not goal-getting retreat. That was more just let's get together and relax. And I was really pressing it. We were at a store on the Strip, and it just wasn't coming together. So we walked away. And
well, you were trying really hard.
I was
a little too hard, and it just wasn't. It wasn't you. You looked silly.
Yeah. Well, I might look silly now to some people, but I love my hat.
You looked silly in the wrong hat.
Yeah, that's right. So we happened to be on Congress Street in Austin, Texas, just chilling, having a pretty cool Wednesday midday walk and stroll and touring Austin, Texas. We strolled on into Allen Boots, and they have a unbelievable amount of boot selection. And then down 2 sets of stairs, they have a hat room. So I walked in and I looked and I found this hat and I put it on, and it's the right size. It fit well. And I was like, I'm in. So,
it was like Cinderella's glass slipper.
yeah, it was one and done. Walked around the store with it on and just fell in love with it. So here we are.
And the interesting part is when we went to Las Vegas for our vacation, to see Lenny Kravitz and actually have a trip that's not related to work, which I was so grateful for.
That's hard to do.
It is. But we did it. We pulled it off. And we're in Vegas. Now we do enjoy some gambling, as we talked about with Joel.
Yeah.
But we did not partake at a high level. And even when we do, it's not a huge sum of money that some people might gamble. Now, $100 is a lot to some people in the gambling world. We'll normally gamble a couple thousand, maybe, like max.
Sure.
Yeah. And so this time we kept it really under control, didn't really gamble and lose. We did lose, of course.
That's why they build hotels in Vegas, right?
Yeah. Well, we didn't go overboard. And then we go to Austin. We're there for one entire day.
That's right.
Walk into Allen Boots and walk out
With a $1,600 bill.
with more money than we spent in Vegas. Like, literally, right. What do they say? At the drop of a hat.
That's it.
Yeah, so not just the hat, but you got some cool boots too.
Yeah, they were pretty great. Yeah, it was a great trip. So The One Thing, and we talked a little bit about real estate with quite a few people, but we also talked about businesses and some mentoring. We met a cool fellow from Ontario, Canada. Ben was in town with his gal, Carly, and then we all sat around the table and met some people from Virginia and Novi, Michigan, and talked a little bit about life and our goals, and we turned into a conversation about, do I sell the house or do I rent the house?
Yeah. Let me fill the people in real quick with the goal setting retreat. Couples goal setting retreat is put on by Jay and Wendy Papazan. Jay is the co-author of The One Thing with Gary Keller. And this goal setting retreat, they dreamed up on a personal level many years ago and have turned that into a retreat that they share with couples like ourselves who go to get on the same page. And if you work with your spouse or you have any kind of, business interaction where it's not just maybe 2 day jobs and a W-2, but I guess I'll argue, even if it is that, like, how do you get on the same page with your spouse about your goals? Very basic personal things. Where your kids are going to attend school. What values do you want to instill with them growing up? Do you vacation once a year? Where do you go?
Your core values, your own core values.
How do you invest? What do you do for retirement? So couples, I think, are maybe missing the mark with not always communicating very well about that. And being in a relationship is hard.
It's really hard. And the ability to get away and do a deep dive, talk a little bit about personal and professional on a level that is awakening.
We had a moment.
Yeah, we were spatting it out a little bit.
Yeah, we had a moment of sheer frustration where you were asking me questions based on the exercise.
What did I write in the book?
I was super frustrated with you because you were trying to elicit an answer from me. I don't even recall the question.
We were working through questions for the fund.
And I didn't have an answer. I didn't have any answer at the moment. And so instead of maybe trying to help me through that moment, you just wrote down in frustration, I don't know, which is what I was saying.
Well, it's because you kept saying it over and over and over
Because you kept asking me the same question over and over. So enlightening, to say the least, right? You've got to try and work through these things.
So the question today is, do I rent my house or do I sell my house? And a lot of people don't know.
I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, but we do know, actually. This one's an easy one for us to spar through. So that's what we're going to talk about. This question came from a friend of ours who, in a real life situation, is looking to make a move to a different state. And he is asking us, the professionals, our opinion, and what factors do they even weigh? Where do you start with that question? And maybe why would you even want to keep your house and not sell it? Some people just like a clean break. Sell it, move on.
So it's an emotional question that is also coupled with money, and those are not things that are easy to work through. Typically speaking, people are talking about their primary residence when they have this conversation, which is often relegated to, a single property and not multiple properties. Mm-hmm. And so the question was spawned based upon potentially having a greater understanding of the real estate game, and posed the question, do I rent or do I sell? And then there's a lot of things that come behind that question that you just have to work through to then find out, is it right or is it not right for the decision that you're going to make? So when you're talking to a numbers guy, obviously a big tax planning piece comes into play. And you have to look at if it's a primary residence, are you married or are you not married? What's your gain going to be? You've got the capital
stop
gains
on that
piece.
for a minute. Yeah, what do you mean your gain? So you bought your home 5 to 10 years ago, and you have a mortgage on your home, and there's an amount of money that you owe, and there's an amount of money that you paid for the home.
Sure.
And then there's an amount of money that it's worth on the open market.
That's right.
Okay, so those are basically the three pieces of math that people want to start with to consider.
And you don't even have to have a mortgage on it. It still boils down to what your basis becomes, and the basis is determined at the time that you buy, and that's the price that you pay, and then your basis is figured out, and that's an accounting term. And then whether you're married or you're not married, you can then sell that house as long as it's your primary residence, which is qualified as living in the home for 2 out of the last 5 years. And if you're single, you can sell with a tax-free gain up to $250,000. So it doesn't mean if you owe nothing on it and you sell it for $250,000. It means if you paid $400,000 for it and you sell it for $650,000, there's no gain. Your basis being $400,000, from a numbers perspective, we'll just keep it simple. Your basis is $400,000 and you sell it for $650,000. That's a gain of $250,000.
And you can have that money tax-free as an individual,
provided you live in the house 2 out of the last 5 years as your primary residence. If you're married, that number is $500,000. So then it would be a $400,000 basis. You could sell it for $900,000, and that's tax-free. So you have to really look at that one way, and that's if you're going to sell it, what do you then do with those funds? The other way that you can look at that is you can always do a loan on a property, and it's pretty tough in life, generally speaking, to use the word never, especially when you're talking about numbers and planning and all the things associated with the real estate game. And this is one of the few times that you would not ever pay tax on a loan. Those funds are tax-free. And so you can actually, let's suppose it's a $400,000 house, you're going to sell it, that's your basis, and you decide not to sell it and you want to keep it. You can refinance and you can put the proceeds in your pocket. So if the proceeds that you get from the loan are any number, you pay off the existing loan, or if there's no loan on the property, let's suppose it's zero. And let's suppose the house is worth not $400,000, which is what you paid, but $600,000, which is the market value today. If you took 70% of that number as a number to just work from.
Why 70%?
Well, 70%. You can do 75%. You can do 80%.
Loan to value.
That's loan
Is
to
that what
value.
you're
That's right.
talking about?
So if you take 70% of that number, 70% of 600,000 is a $420,000 number. Subtract your costs. Let's just round down and call that number 410 or 400. All of those funds are tax-free. And so what are you going to do with those funds?
Is there any limit on that?
No,
You could have
it's a loan.
just the 70% of the mortgage amount in a loan. You don't have that tax $250,000, $500,000.
No, because you're still
number.
retaining the property, and that's the do I rent or do I sell conversation.
But that's two ways to
That's
get
just two.
money tax-free from owning real estate.
And that's if it's a primary residence, and you can do the latter, the loan piece, whether it's an investment property, a second home, or a primary residence. And it could be single family, it can be multifamily, it can be industrial, commercial. Those are all things that you're permitted to do, but loan funds are not ever taxable. And so provided that you're putting those monies to work and then creating a cash flowing asset, what does that do for you? And that's the rhetorical question that we would answer for someone: do I rent or do I sell?
Cash flowing asset, meaning what are the average rents? What can you rent that home for?
It's certainly correct. The conversation then becomes, well, I'm not experienced in owning a rental property, and so how do I do that? And
Or you're moving out of state, and now how are you going to manage a rental from a remote
you don't.
location?
Without that experience, you don't manage it. You hire someone to do it. And then what type of rent? Is it a long-term rental? Is it a mid-term rental? Is it a short-term rental? Those are all things that you can pay attention to. Is it a single-family home? Is it a multifamily property? Is it a mixed-use property like the building we're in today?
It's probably a single family home,
Most times.
yeah, from the questions that we typically get with what do you do with your home? Now, I think that a lot of people maybe overcomplicate or make some decisions based on fear of the unknown. And this is something that they're not familiar with. They've never done this before. They've never hired a property manager, and then they worry. And so frequently they just sell the home to make a clean break. But I've also spoken with plenty of folks who say, gosh, I should not have sold that house 5 years
Well, that's why
Look at what it's worth today.
It's the genesis of the show. And our listeners and our guests and our friends and family, they're all asking questions about what did you talk about today, or what are you going to talk about tomorrow? Generally speaking, it's just a conversation for us, and it's a talking point, which is where this topic came up. And so the question, rent or sell, what do I do? You should not answer that question with a hindsight. You should answer that question with a forward-looking glass and make the decisions so that you're not saying, I wish I would have. Right. And that's the genesis of the show. That's why we talk about these things, so we can help folks through that Q&A and that kind of, mental game that you have to play to understand what's next. And the more you do that, and what I call turn the money, then you can put that money to work and do bigger and better things and build wealth and create less stress, because you are not asking the question or making the phrase, I wish I would have.
Okay. The answer is it depends.
That's right.
Always.
It does depend.
In real estate, I think the answer is always it depends.
You also have an exchange, right? So if it is an investment property and you want to not necessarily look at the tax game, and you can figure out ways to continue to buy cash flowing assets, you can run it through a 1031 exchange. And those funds can be used to purchase another property tax deferred. And you can continue to build and scale in real estate, which is a third way to be able to look at things. That it involves selling, and it involves not paying tax at the time, because you can defer that further down the road. And then that gives you the down payment and the closing costs associated with purchasing your next property. That is also then, like our guests are talking about when they're on here, how can you buy something in real estate? And is it a tenant? Is it multiple tenants? Are they short-term tenants? Are they mid-term tenants? Are they then paying the monthly payments and the bills associated with the property that you own? Mm-hmm. And at the point that you make that decision, and let's just say it's one of those three options, it's a primary residence and you're going to sell tax-free because of the capital gain thresholds that we just talked about. You could refinance and put cash in your pocket and not pay tax, or you can sell if it's an investment property and run it through a 1031 exchange. So the phrase, it depends, is eclectic, and that's what we're for. That's what we're here for.
Buying, selling, or investing. We are the Creative Ones. Visit us at creativeones.com. Common misconception I hear over and over again with selling a home and the profits that you receive from the home. So here's what people think. If I sell my house and I make money from the sale of my home, I have to roll that money into my new house. I have to move that equity. When I get my check, I got to put it in the new one or else I'm going to get taxed. And I just have to say, just like mark this down this one time, just this one time.
I didn't know the rule.
I knew a tax rule that Brandon Davis did not know.
Yeah.
And we actually had to look this up because there was a little bit of a debate. And I said, I know this was a thing. It really was, but it's been a long time, but people still think this is the active tax rule and what they have to do. You do not have to move your money into the next property to avoid taxes. So we looked it up.
Not anymore. Yeah. In fact, October of 98, when I started my career, this rule was already in effect. It was the Tax Relief Act of 1997, which I did not know. So yes, one line for Kate. And I'm sure she gets a lot more lines in terms of winning and losing, but
not normally for tax planning though.
The rule, the Tax Relief Act of 1997, prior to that, you were required to roll the proceeds into a house of equal or greater value, or pay tax on what the gain was. And so that rule's changed to the 250-500 rule, which we spoke of a few moments ago. And
can you imagine having to roll it over into your new house? I'm telling you, I don't know what the percentage is, but I feel like it's a good 50% of people that I talk to think that this is still the rule.
Yeah. So similarly, and why that's actually bringing up an interesting topic here on the fly in my mind, because that prior to that rule, you would have been able to roll the proceeds, equal or greater value into the property that you're buying, tax-free, of course, prior to 1997. And then you could still go get a loan and get those proceeds back. And that's actually something that we mentor folks on through a 1031 exchange. So if you're going to take a property, now in this particular case, in order to avoid what's called boot, and boot is a mechanism that you need to avoid so you don't pay tax when you use a 1031 exchange. So the property has to be like kind and it must be of greater value. And you can't put your hands on any of the proceeds from the property that you sold. It must remain in the exchange, and then all of those proceeds must go to the new property. However, you can refinance and you can put money in your pocket tax-free and create some liquidity and continue to have that money work for you, and through the velocity of money, continue to speed up your acquisitions and cash flow other assets that you're buying. So it's an interesting rule that, yes, I did not recall. And having that rule be part of the conversation today is pretty great because it just spawned another idea on the 1031 exchange piece.
Yeah. So almost no matter what the rule is, there's almost always another way to still
access capital.
Yeah. Which totally. You get to that feels like a hard stop. Like, well, I can't do that. And then in comes Brandon Davis with, well, but you can do this.
That's right. So it's access to capital. And that's the biggest piece for a lot of our listeners. And the barrier to entry is, how do I do this without capital? Another topic that we won't talk about today because it's a rather intricate topic with creative financing, but that was recently a conversation that came up. Another way for access to capital is creative financing. And so there's just, to the listeners, there's a lot of ways to be able to continue to scale in real estate, be it a primary residence, be it an investment property. Do I sell my house? Do I rent my house? Do I involve property management? Do I not? There's things that are intimately involved, tax planning purposes, and probably the most important word that I used in the last 30 seconds is planning. And planning is not something that people do consistently. It's just, for example, tax season, it's Q4. I hope listeners are planning, because come January 1, it's over. There's things that you are no longer permitted to do because it's January of 2025. And so if you're planning and you know what you're going to look like based on your pro formas and your decisions that you're making in Q4, that planning is no longer just, hey, where's my CPA? It's almost April 15th and I need to file my taxes. That's getting your taxes done. And if you just get your taxes done, then you're certainly not planning. And it's a very important piece of what we bring to the table, especially through corporate consulting with tax planning and mortgage and real estate planning being so much integrated together.
Yeah. So that also brings to light another common misconception, number 2. When you call Brandon at Corporate Consulting or when you call Kate at the Creative Ones, you do not have to be ready to have your sign in the yard and photos being taken or hiring you off the bat. Calling us to have a conversation and ask questions, for me, it might be learning the value of your home so then you can make other decisions about what you're going to do over the next year or so. And the same thing for you, making a phone call and starting to ask some questions just might spur a conversation. You do not have to be ready to act to call us to start learning about real estate, your home, and how you're going to do things. And I hear that a lot also. Well, they want to wait until they think they're ready. But there are things that I could have helped with. I could have told you, I could have made recommendations to not just maybe sell your home faster, but increase the amount of money that you'll get for your home and decrease the amount of money that you spent. So at a very low level, dumb example, some people might think that they need to make specific home renovations in order to sell, and they're overlooking other things that are actually more important.
Yep.
So call me before you're ready, please. I don't care. I'm not going anywhere. Call me 6 months. Call me a year before you're ready. But call me and let me help you.
There is a phrase that we coined in the industry, especially from a consultative perspective, and it's the cost of waiting. And that cost of waiting is something that's a real number, and it's a real big problem.
Let's talk about that. A lot of people are waiting. They were waiting for the election. They're waiting for interest rates. They're waiting for the housing market to crash. I think those are the 3 top ones that I hear.
Holidays.
Well, we do that every year.
Yeah.
But these 3 big topics are, I think, the ones that I hear the most frequently. Waiting for the market to crash, waiting for interest rates to come back down, and waiting for the election. And now they're still going to wait until Mr. Trump takes office, and I don't know what they think is going to happen in their day-to-day lives or the real estate value of their home. I'm not sure, other than maybe it's just a conversation based out of fear of the unknown. But waiting for all 3 of those things, in our professional opinion, they make very little to no sense. And there's a lot of reasons why. You want to hammer through some of the topics?
We just had Joel Block on here talking about thinking, seeing, acting differently, TSA. And professional investors don't wait. They make decisions based on numbers. They make decisions based on conversations that they're having, and they're in the know because they're an advantage player. And you may decide that waiting is an integral part of the decision, but that's not a excuse. It's a strategy. Whereas the election, the market crashing, interest rates, those are all things that you're not ever going to control. In fact, if we look at interest rates, my Lord, we built our house, our vacation home in the fall of 22. We were supposed to close in the summer of 22. And what happened to interest rates in the spring of 22? They skyrocketed. And so the investment decision, of course it changes. Money is a real thing and doesn't grow on trees though. So you really have to be able to understand what are you going to do next. The formula changes. What did we do? We closed. So of course we talked about that already. Are we going to close or are we not going to close? Of course we're going to close.
Investors, though, make these decisions day to day, as you're referencing. And here's a good example of one. Many investors in the flip and fix market use hard money.
They do.
And hard money comes at, or should I say always, an increased interest rate, a higher than normal interest rate. The interest rates right now in our market are hovering somewhere between 6 and 7 or 7 and 8 almost.
Sure.
And then what would a hard money lender be charging for interest right now?
Well, you just covered a 30-year mortgage rate, or in some cases a 15 or 20-year amortization. for commercial or residential being in the 7-ish, mid 7s, low 8s. And that's an important thing to distinguish, because residential or commercial, albeit they're different, overall the market is not too different. And so when you're talking about a point and you're having a conversation about real estate, is it important? Sure, it's important, but it's not going to be the end all do all. Except the fact, if you talk about hard money and access to that, there's a reason they're lending you the money. There's fees associated with hard money that are outside the norm. So you might pay, 3 to 6, 7, 8 points just to get access to the money. And then you're going to pay 10, 12, 15%. Typically, there's going to be a minimum period of time that someone's going to want you to have the loan, or an amount of money that they're looking to make on the deal. So whether you are supposed to have it for 6 months to a year and you only need it for 3 months, you might be responsible for the remaining 3 months to pay before you can refinance out of that or sell the property. You still have to pay those proceeds.
But when it comes to fix and flippers doing hard money, you know what they're doing?
Tell me.
They're making money.
They are making money.
They're making money even under those circumstances. And so, as you say, rate is a catalyst to the money. It just because it's increased doesn't mean that the deal or the move or the situation doesn't make sense.
No, you don't stop at rate. And a lot of times people do. You have to evaluate the entire formula, and rate is only part of the formula. And the reason that people talk about rate is because it's specifically associated with money. Is it a rate of return? Is it the amount of interest that you're going to pay? What rate, air quotes, are we talking about? And you don't just stop at that word. If you stop at that word, you're not actually looking at the last piece of the formula, which is, what do the numbers actually look like? And that's the decision-making process. Complete the formula, do the math, and understand what those numbers actually mean. And then you decide how you're going to move forward and with what type of financing or what access to capital you're going to use.
Yeah. A couple points to our younger generation of people coming into the housing market. They're in their early to late 20s, and maybe they've never purchased before. Interest rate, I'm just going to make this announcement for the people who don't know, is not a pull up to the gas pump and everybody gets the same rate.
That's right.
Banks advertise rates. They put them on billboards. They put them on banners on the internet. And it looks like if you walked into the bank and I walked into the bank, that's the rate that we would get. And that's just simply not the case.
I think one of my favorite signs in banking is loan sale. We are having loans on sale. Oh, my word. So
right. It's individual. It's on your credit score, your debt to income ratio, your length of time period to have your credit. It's a very individual number. So I just want to put that out there, that it's not the same for everybody.
Not only that, but it involves planning. And the more that you plan, the more that you know, the more conversations you have. It's another phrase, the velocity of money. And if you can keep your money moving and you can keep it increasing, albeit not wildly, as long as it's got a good tempo, a good cadence, and you're comfortable with that, and you actually know what that translates to and what it means, then your money would typically continue to move forward. And by doing so, you're able to scale and able to make more money.
So here's a thought maybe some people might not think about. How long is the average person in their primary residence?
About 7 years.
7 to 10.
It's actually increasing a little bit now because of the lock-in effect that's happened since 2020, 2021 with interest rates and not as many people moving. The lock-in effect meaning because my interest rate is so low, my payment is thereby low. And as a result of that, how am I going to be able to move from property A to property B and continue to afford what that new payment looks like because interest rates being increased? So that's an income question. It's a cash flow question.
Right.
But that number of how long someone's staying in their home, it's ticking up for sure. But around 7 or slightly north of that is still reasonable.
Yeah, I believe that that's about the correct statistic. And so buyers will overanalyze an interest rate or put an abundance of importance on 0.25% or even smaller, an eighth of a percent, one lender to another lender, thinking that they're getting a good savings, almost like you're buying a car that's, $500 off or $2,500 off, and that determines what dealership you buy from. People put that importance on these very small increments of interest rates in their lending decisions that they think they're making a good choice. But if they look at the big picture on a standard 30-year mortgage, primary residence, and they're there in their home somewhere between 7 to 10 years, what's the real number of the interest that they're paying? And does that 0.5 or 1/4% really matter over time? Number one is the question. And then number two, if you're waiting for that interest rate to come down before you buy, what do you think everybody else is doing?
Yeah, the competition becomes real. I call that the gas pump effect. So you get gas on a Monday and gas is $2.95. And then on Tuesday, you see it at $2.85. And you think, well, dang, I just got gas at $2.95 and you have a 20-gallon tank. So a 20-gallon tank in 10 cents is $2. That's less than what a lot of people spend on a coffee.
But on the marquee, it seems so much more significant.
And so you're just walking around and your day's ruined because of $2. So
but everyone else is going to rush to the market at the same time. And then when you have more competition
prices.
And not as much inventory, what happens?
Yeah, prices increase.
And so great, you saved a whole percent. You waited for interest rates to come under 6.5. You waited to get 5.75% to now what? Pay how much more for the house? To compete, to have to waive a home inspection, to have to get in line, literally compete. I mean, write an offer, auction style almost, that is trying to be better than somebody else just to get the house. And then you lose, and then you have to go back and do it again. And my point for these people that are waiting is if you wait and everybody else does, you cannot control what homes are on the market, what available properties are there, and how many other people you're going to be bidding against.
Or the price, which continues to increase.
But what you can control is when you own the real estate, you can refi when the rate drops. It's really simple. You call your lender and you ask, is this a good decision? Do you think that I should refinance right now? And that you can control. And the rates will always be changing. And so the moral of the story is, don't wait for the rates to drop. Just buy the house. It will cost you more money in the long term should you wait.
Again, cost of waiting. That's a real thing.
Right. And so one of the other reasons that people are waiting is they think the market's going to crash.
Well, no one has a crystal ball, and you just really have to look at a lot of the economic indicators, interest rate and employment and all the things associated with what's going to happen in the economy. I mean, what we've discovered is the United States economy is extremely robust and resilient, especially after COVID and all the liquidity that was pushed into the market. People were real concerned with, what's going to happen when we start to correct. And it was a pretty dire straits here for real estate over the last year and a half, 2 years, dating back to 22, 23 when things really started to change. And interest rates rose and things became suppressed because of the lock-in effect, because of the lack of supply, which takes us to what most people don't think is going to happen is the market crashing. And why the market is not likely to crash is built on a fundamental supply-demand economic principle. And one of the things that I just spoke about, in fact, I was talking about it in Austin on a sidebar discussion, from 1970 to 2024, there have been 4 years where the amount of construction predating 2008, so 2008, 2007, 2006, and 2005, those are the only years where the amount of construction superseded the amount of time over the last 54 years that properties were being built. And so in 2009, there was a precipitous decline. We stopped building homes. The financial crisis scared the heck out of a lot of people. And so we're not building homes at an oversupply. We are just catching up. And that's a real big indicator for folks about why, even though homes are staying on the market a little bit longer right now, so you might not be selling a house in 2 weeks, you might be selling it in 2 months, except the offers are still coming in extremely competitive in most markets. There are some markets that are softening a little bit here or there, especially places where you've been overheated like South Florida or other markets without naming them all. The real big indicator, though, is supply demand. And so when you don't have other homes to move into and there aren't those choices to make of where you're going to go and what you're going to live in just because of the lack of supply, then that keeps prices, stable and in this case, increasing. And so for folks to think about the market crashing, if you could just look at 1970 to 2024, over that 54-year period of time, there's only 4 years where it's superseded that 54-year average, and we're below that average 2009 forward. There's just no housing supply.
And the other statistic that people would want to pay attention to is mortgage rates in default, which are currently at an all-time low.
Yeah, they're pretty low. In fact, there's just a lot of stability in the marketplace. Employment's relatively strong, although there's some numbers there that you look at a lot of the employment being government employment. There is some pain in the marketplace, so we definitely need to pay attention, although it's a good time to be alive. It's pretty great.
So my little tip that really helped me working through the foreclosure market, something that I picked up on and something that I still pay attention to. And this is by no means any kind of scientific study or proven on any case other than my own personal experience. Locally watching the amount of foreclosures that enter into the market based on the, mortgages defaulting and that default rate. How do people know what they are without Googling that actual statistic? Well, in your local marketplace, one of the ways to keep your thumb on the market is to pay attention to your sheriff sales and foreclosures. And at the peak foreclosure market, the local sheriff's department was auctioning homes every Tuesday at a list of 2 or 3 pages long of properties. And I watched...
We bought some of those.
We did. And I watched those sheriff sales go from the second Tuesday of every month as I was new to investing and trying to find some good deals out there. And they would auction off a dozen properties or so every second Tuesday. And then as the default rates were increasing in our mortgage crisis, they went from 2 to 3 to every Tuesday the sheriff was auctioning homes. And then as the market started to correct, they reduced down 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, and we're back to just 1. So at a very low level, pay attention to your local sheriff sales. And if and when you see those numbers increasing, of course, it's an indicator that more people are defaulting and something bigger is happening. And then that's maybe where you dig deeper and start asking some professionals more questions. But right now, to me, with my real estate hat on, it's a very easy way to show stability.
Stability is a good word.
Yeah.
A distinctive approach to passive income with luxury vacation rentals.
For more information, check out our website, quinvestors.com.
So we just had a conversation about stability, and we were talking about the cost of waiting and people looking at the election, they're looking at interest rates, why the market may crash. And part of the reason that we started the fund is because Quinvestors is a very strategic opportunity for people to look at investing in real estate in different ways. And we're very tuned in to the things we talked about, not only here locally, but throughout the country in very specific markets. Take Phoenix, for example.
Right. So we're investing in properties personally to meet our personal goals with luxury vacation rentals. And when we see opportunities, frequently, it's not just one property. There's many times where we find multiple properties. And that was a lot of the birth of Quinvestors, knowing that we can't buy all of these amazing opportunities with our own capital. We can only source so much. And so what we have been able to accomplish is getting investors and other people interested in what we're doing to be able to get in on this opportunity. And so if you want to diversify your portfolio, Quinvestors might be the right answer for you. For the people who don't want to manage rental properties, source properties, and go to real estate school that we've been living for the last 30 years of our lives, you can't replace the experience with a couple of books or classes. This is something that we live, eat, and breathe every day. And if you don't know this, but you're interested in it, Quinvestors might be the answer for you to be able to experience some of this with us.
Well, it's momentum, right? So we're talking about momentum in the sense that we can only buy so many properties with our own capital. And when you're able to diversify as an individual, and you've already got maybe your own property, primary residence, or a few rental properties, and you want to continue to move forward, there's a way to be able to do that, not have to be associated with managing or knowing when to refinance or knowing what property management company to use. And that's what professional investors do. We look for opportunities. We think about those opportunities differently than most. We see those opportunities differently than most. And probably the most important piece is we act. So when we're identifying what to do, much like we just talked about with stability, why is the market not likely to crash? All of these are things that together we work with our partners through the fund, our limited partners, our vendors, to be able to continue. And we just had one of those calls yesterday on a Sunday. I'm not sure how many other people are having investing conversations on a Sunday, but that's what we do.
Yeah. And to dumb it down, we're pooling money together with Quinvestors to be able to purchase more properties at a more rapid rate. And so what we are looking to do is to connect with people who want to learn more about what it is that we're doing, who want to invest in real estate at a passive level. And then we're also looking for properties and opportunities across the country. Specifically, we have some states that we're targeting. You want to run through that list for me?
That's Arizona, Ohio, Michigan on the Great Lakes. Arizona's in Phoenix. North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida. 8 states. And micro markets within those states, very specific spots, aggregate of properties in those spots, allowing the property management company to be able to be super efficient with how they're managing each property and the guest experience. And all of those are things that we think about as we're searching for properties and ultimately acting on what we buy.
Yeah, some of our listeners might have a great opportunity. Other real estate agents out there, other brokers, other investors. We're looking for not just on-market properties, but off-market properties as well. And we're searching for people who potentially want to get out of short-term rentals. They might be managing it themselves. They're burned out. It wasn't what they thought that it was.
It could be just someone selling their house. I mean, we just talked about that a few moments ago. They may just be ready to sell and put their property on the market. And as opposed to doing that, there's a few ways to talk about that through the fund, which is a pretty technical conversation that we don't need to get into and go down that rabbit hole. But there are A shares, B shares, and C shares. And all of those are things that the fund itself gives us the dynamic opportunities to continue to propel forward and find properties in different markets that we just talked about.
Right. So who do you know that would want to invest that we should talk to? And who do you know that might have some opportunities for us across the country in those states?
That's a great idea. Let's do it.
Quinvestors.